Once upon a time, in a splendid land known as the Kingdom of Glimmerdale, where the hills were lush and green, stood a magnificent castle. In a sun-drenched room at the very top of the highest tower lived a very special object, Jasper. Jasper was no ordinary looking glass. His frame was crafted from solid gold and encrusted with emeralds and rubies. But what made Jasper truly special wasn't his jewels, it was his magic. Jasper was the mirror of honesty. Whoever stood before him would hear nothing but the absolute truth. If your hair was messy, Jasper would gently say, "I'm afraid your hair looks rather like a bird's nest on the left." If you had a smudge of chocolate on your face, he would whisper, "Someone has been enjoying the sweets, do wipe your cheek." Everyone in the kingdom trusted Jasper because Jasper never told a fib. The ruler of this land was King Percival. King Percival was a jolly, slightly round man who loved wearing fancy clothes. He had a kind heart, but he had one tiny problem: he simply hated being criticized. If someone said, "Your Majesty, your button is done up wrong," he would sulk, his bottom lip would wobble, and he would be grumpy all day long. One morning, King Percival burst into Jasper's room with great excitement. It was the day of the Grand Summer Fête, and the king was to give a speech to all his subjects. The royal barber, Mr. Snip, had just cut the king's hair, but oh dear! Mr. Snip's hand had slipped, and he had cut the king's fringe, cuckoo, far too short. The king's forehead looked enormous. King Percival stood before the mirror, adjusted his cape, and asked, "Tell me, my dear Jasper, how does my hair look?" "Simply splendid, isn't it?" Jasper looked at the king's hair. It looked dreadful. It looked as though a goat had chewed it. Jasper was just about to say, "Your Majesty, your fringe is rather short," when he saw the hopeful sparkle in King Percival's eyes. Jasper thought to himself, "If I tell the truth, the king will be terribly upset. He will be miserable for the festival. Perhaps, just this once, I shall tell a tiny, little white lie. Just to keep him happy." And so, for the first time in his life, Jasper did not reflect the truth. He polished his glass surface and chirped, "Oh, King Percival, your hair looks marvelous. Modern, dashing, and absolutely perfect." King Percival beamed with joy. "I knew it." "Thank you, Jasper," he cried and skipped out of the room. Jasper let out a sigh of relief. He hadn't upset the king. "I did a good deed," he thought. But suddenly, a tiny, grey smudge appeared in the corner of his glass. It was the mark of a lie. In the afternoon, King Percival returned. He had eaten a large spinach pastry for lunch. And there, right between the king's two front teeth, was a giant piece of green spinach. The king smiled at the mirror. "Jasper, how is my smile? Is it bright enough to greet my people?" Jasper saw the giant green blob. He was about to say, "Sire, you have a garden in your teeth," but he remembered how happy the king had been earlier. "If I tell him now, he will be embarrassed," Jasper reasoned. So, he lied again. "Your Majesty, your smile shines like the sun. Your teeth are as white as pearls." "Brilliant," said King Percival, and marched out with his huge, spinach-filled grin. The grey smudge on Jasper's glass grew larger. His reflection was no longer as clear as it used to be. By late afternoon, it was time for the main event. King Percival put on his most extravagant outfit. But in his rush, he made a terrible mistake. He put his trousers on back to front. The zip was at the back, the pockets were at the front, and he was waddling like a penguin. Plus, the terrible haircut and the spinach were still there. The king stood before Jasper one last time. "Jasper," he said. "How do I look? Do I look like a flawless king?" Jasper looked at himself. His glass was now so foggy and cloudy that he could barely see the truth himself. "I can't turn back now," thought Jasper. "If I tell the truth now, my previous lies will be discovered." With a shaky voice, he told his final lie. "Yes, Your Majesty. You are the smartest, tidiest, most perfect king the realm has ever seen." King Percival puffed out his chest proudly. "That's my mirror," he said, and stepped out onto the balcony where thousands of people were waiting. A huge cheer went up when the king appeared. But then, the cheering slowly stopped. The silence in the square was broken by a small child giggling. Then, Princess Poppy's whisper was heard. "Why are Daddy's trousers on backwards?" Then the baker, Mr. Crust, nudged his neighbor. "Does the king have lettuce in his teeth?" And finally, Mr. Snip the barber whispered, "His hair." "Oh, that hair." The crowd tried to hold back their laughter out of respect, but the sight was just too funny. King Percival didn't understand why people were staring so strangely. He waved and smiled, showing everyone the spinach. He tried to walk, but nearly tripped over his backwards trousers. Just then, the king's youngest daughter, Princess Poppy, who was only 5, and children are always honest, ran up to her father. "Daddy," said Poppy, "your trousers are backwards, you have food in your teeth, and your hair looks funny. Why did you come out like this?" King Percival froze. He whipped a small pocket mirror out of his cape. When he saw himself, his cheeks turned as red as a beetroot. He didn't know where to look from shame. He turned around and ran straight back inside, rushing to Jasper's room. "Jasper," shouted the king. His voice was hurt and sad. "You lied to me. You told me I looked splendid. Everyone laughed at me. Why did you do this?" Jasper was now so cloudy he couldn't even see his own reflection. He spoke in a sorrowful voice, "Your Majesty, I simply didn't want to upset you. I didn't want you to be sad about your hair. I didn't want you to be embarrassed by the spinach. I told little lies to make you happy." King Percival sighed deeply. He sat down in front of the mirror. "Oh, Jasper," he said softly. "You did it to stop me from being upset, but look, now I am much more upset. If you had told me about my hair this morning, I would have worn a hat. If you had mentioned the spinach, I would have brushed my teeth. If you had told me about my trousers, I would have fixed them." The king stood up and touched Jasper's golden frame. "Jasper, true friends are not those who lie to keep us happy. True friends are those who tell us the truth, even when it is difficult, to help us be better. Your honesty was protecting me. Your lies made me look foolish." Hearing these words, Jasper felt terrible shame. He understood his mistake. He thought he was being kind, but he had actually done the king a great disservice. "I do apologize, King Percival," said Jasper. And that was the first honest thing he had said all day. "I promise, from this moment on, I shall never stray from the truth, no matter what." As soon as Jasper made this promise, a magical breeze swept through the room. The grey fog, the smudges, and the clouds on the glass vanished instantly. Jasper was once again a sparkling, crystal-clear mirror. King Percival brushed his teeth, put on a dashing hat, and fixed his trousers. He stood before Jasper again. "How do I look now, Jasper?" he asked, though he was a little afraid of the answer. Jasper shone brightly and answered cheerfully, "Your trousers are straight, and your teeth are clean, your Majesty. But that hat clashes terribly with your cape. I think you should wear the blue one." King Percival laughed heartily. "That is my honest mirror." He put on the blue hat and went back out to greet his people. This time, he truly looked magnificent. From that day on, everyone in the Kingdom of Glimmerdale learned an important lesson. Sometimes, even if we don't want to hear it, the truth is the best friend we have to help us shine. And Jasper the mirror never, ever told a lie again, not even to make a king smile. The end.